I wanted to thank the Clyfford Still Museum and GCI for the opportunity to share the work that we did on this project, which is the conservation work on Mark Rothko's Harvard murals. And like every other project that you heard today, it's not just an individual or a small group, it's actually a much larger group. And I just want to acknowledge the people that contributed to this. The camera culture group at MIT's Media Lab, who helped us enormously with understanding about projection and understanding about writing computer code that we needed to use. The Imaging and Media Lab from the University of Basel, who helped us restore historic photographs. And then the team at Harvard Art Museums, which was made up of a group of people who had very distinctive and complementary perspectives on the project. Carol Mancusi-Ungaro, who had worked on the Houston paintings and is really an expert on Mark Rothko and is very versed in Rothko scholarship. Jens Stenger, who was one of my postdocs and who stayed on to work on this project, is a femtosecond spectroscopist, a physicist who understands light and in a miraculous way was able to also write computer code. Mary Schneider Enriquez, who is the curator of the exhibition that was on, she worked on the 1988 exhibition of the Harvard murals. And Christina Rosenberger, an art historian who is more well known for her work on Agnes Martin, but provided a great deal of research, art historical research underpinnings that were needed for this project, and myself with the perspective of a conservator and a scientist. And just so that I didn't feel left out, I thought I would include this. And Mark Rothko's the moustache sitting here in the front right corner. One of the things that is so important about Rothko is his desire to create an environment, an immersive environment for people, for viewers. And this is his Whitechapel exhibition from 1961. And you can see the way that the pictures are hung close together, low to the ground, that it's a chance for people to be surrounded by his works. And there are various accounts of the optimal viewing distance from a couple of inches to 18 inches. But it's really about creating an environment. And as a continuation of that, he created 3 mural cycles. The Seagram murals, which you heard about, which are now living at Tate, the Kawamura Museum and the National Gallery of Art, the Harvard murals, which I'll talk about, and the Rothko Chapel, which is in Houston. And interestingly, of these 3 commissions, the only one that he saw installed was the Harvard murals. And one of the important things that we wanted to do with this project was to bring the murals which had dropped out of scholarship back into the discussion. They were commissioned by Vasily Leontief, a Nobel laureate who was the head of the Harvard Fellows, and he wanted it for their meeting room on the top of the then new Holyoke Center, which was a building designed by Jose Luis Sert. Harvard was going through a period of modernism in the early 60s, and this is part of that process. The Harvard Fellows were not able to stay in that room because the rent was too high. They met elsewhere on campus, but the room was maintained as a dining room for important events. And Mark Rothko, in considering this commission, said that he's been preoccupied for a number of years with the idea of translating his pictorial concepts into murals which would serve as an image for a public place. And it's an image that is the important part in here. It's about creating an environment, one picture, and all the murals, all the separate paintings that make up this should be one picture. And if you look at the floor plan, you can see in the niche murals 1, 2, and 3, which are all butted up against each other. And this niche actually reappears in the Houston Chapel. So I think there may be a connection between what he went through here and then his architectural input to the next major commission. On the opposite wall is number 4. Then there's a servery entrance. There's the servery entrance here. There's the public entrance here. And then mural number 5. And on these 2 side walls are floor-to-ceiling windows, which caused all the trouble that we experienced. So here you can see the murals installed in the mid-60s. They're jammed right up against the corner of the ceiling and the wall. This is a baffle hiding the lighting. And you can see that they fit very tightly in the niche here. And that's an important architectural, it's important for the architecture, and it's something that we considered in the exhibition afterwards. Turning around, you can see the servery entrance, and there used to be a little level here where people could rest trays, so you can imagine what went on in the corner here. This is number 4. Again, you can see that baffle hiding the lights, and then these floor-to-ceiling windows. So we're going to move around the room this way, and you can see the public entrance, mural number 5, and you can see the amount of light that's streaming in. Now, Mark Rothko wanted the curtains drawn the whole time so that you could appreciate the paintings. The problem was that this was on the 10th floor of a building which had fantastic views across the Charles River. And of course, nobody paid the slightest bit of attention to him. And when the Harvard Art Museum staff insisted that the curtains be kept closed, the decentralized nature of Harvard meant that no one paid the museums any attention either.
Is that south? Is that south?
That is south, yes. And so in 1979, after a lot of insistence, especially people like Sally Zeckhauser, who went on to work in the president's office, about the condition of the murals, they were taken down and put into storage and have remained in essentially the same condition since. So this is what we had when we started the project. And what we wanted to do with the project was not point fingers. We didn't want to say Mark Rothko's at fault. We didn't want to say Harvard's at fault. What we wanted to do was move forward with this. And we decided that this is our starting point. We've got all the litho red has faded. We want to find a way of bringing these paintings back so that people can experience these paintings in an environment. And so in doing so, what we discussed were the 3 things that make up the viewing experience, which is the painting, the viewer, and the light. And we needed to consider these 3 things individually. So the paintings are unvarnished, and the background has got a very thin mixture of litho red, some ultramarine, and this rabbit skin glue, which is applied to the canvas. It's soaked into the interstices, and you can see that the nubs of the canvas also form part of the visual experience. So if you were to varnish that, you would have all kinds of changes in the relative colours. The canvas would darken, you'd get saturation, it would be problematic. And the egg tempera, which forms the figures, is slightly glossy, and putting a varnish over that would also cause some issues. So we decided that the paintings themselves needed to be left alone. There are things that were not on the market when we started this project, and these are things that can be used by the viewer to alter their experience, or augment, I think is the right word. Google Glass, which obviously makes you very happy. A HoloLens, which allows you to play computer games on your furniture. And Oculus Rift, which is actually, it's an entirely immersive experience. You're seeing an entirely digital image. But these are things that could be used in the future, and I know Marika Spring at the National Gallery had experimented with Google Glass, but had found it not quite up to where it needed to be, but there's no doubt that it will get to a place where it's going to be something we're talking about in the future. So the third thing is the light. And we used, and I'm going to talk about Jerry Headley here as well. In one of the classes at the Courtauld Institute, Jerry was talking about this paper by Raymond Lafontaine. He set up a painting with yellow varnish on it, had 2 slide projectors, one with a blue filter in front of it, and we shone the light onto the painting, balanced it with the other slide projector. I mean, it's very, very jerry-rigged, but if you move it around, you actually end up seeing bits of the painting as if there was no varnish there. And that's an experience that had stuck with me for a long time, and that informed me that light was a very real possibility. And each of us on the team had had some experience with light in being able to alter how we experience a painting. So we sat down and we decided to work through that. But what we needed to do first was work out what the paintings looked like, or create a target image. And we had Ektachrome slides from 1964 from their installation in the Holyoke Centre, but the dyes on the Ektachromes are unstable, and even though they've been stored in a dark file, they had faded themselves. And what we needed to do was take the slides to Basel. So Jens jumped on a plane with all the slides, worked with Rudi Geschwind at the university and used his custom-made scanner, applied chemical fading models. We were able to use these colour chips down the bottom, and Dan Kushel provided us with a vintage colour chart. And we got as far as we could, and then Kate and Christopher Rothko gave us access to panel number 6. Now, this was a spare panel that came up to Harvard, was not installed, and it went back to New York, and it had been in storage. But it had faded, but it has this unfaded strip across the middle, and particularly this area here is in very, very good condition. And so we were able to use this for the background on all of the panels, and this for the colour of the figure in number 5. And so by doing that, we could apply all of these parameters to the faded Ektachromes and get an idea of what the paintings looked like in 1964, and then apply that to all of the murals and get an understanding of what they looked like. So we had target images of what we were aiming for. The next step was to work out the next step was to be able to get the paintings to look like the target images. So what we did was take a photograph of the faded state of the painting, feed it into a PC, and then compare it to the target image. And this looks like it's a simple subtraction, but in fact what we're doing is creating an algorithm that compensates for the red, green and blue channels on each of the digital components and compares those with the grayscale as well, and it comes out with a compensation image which you can think of as a map of the lost colour. And this is where MIT came in. Yeah, they were great partners. They really helped us a lot through this process. Now the paintings have been stretched and unstretched and restretched several times, and we needed to be able to get the compensation image to shine through the digital projector onto the painting in exactly the right alignment. And so we had to write some alignment software, and that allowed it to happen so that the faded painting, the picture with the faded painting with the projected compensation looked the same as the target image. And that happened, and this compensation image is made up of some 2 million pixels. So we were getting the right colour, the right brightness, and getting it shone in the right location here. And this is another way of looking at it. I'm holding a whiteboard in front of the painting with the projector on, and you can see the compensation image shone onto the whiteboard here, so you can see just how detailed this compensation image is. And here, this is the painting with the compensation image, and you can see that it looks like a painting, which was really what we wanted. Now, these are shots during the de-installation, but I thought they'd be informative to see. On the right-hand side, you can see the compensation images being shone directly onto the wall, so you can see just how much has been lost from the murals, but you can also see how carefully aligned and how much information there is in each of those compensation images. We also learned during the process that the lighting of the room was as important as what was being shone onto the paintings. We didn't want a glowing rectangle on the wall. What we needed was your eye to move across the surface of the picture and around the room without being interrupted. And so we had lighting that would go up to the edge of the painting but stop. There's some wash light over the surface of the painting, and the rest of the room is lit. And so it created an environment. And one of the things that we also needed to come to grips with was what our eyes were telling us versus what we wanted to see. And we found that we would be doing all this with the computer, but then we'd look at it and the background colour would appear different in each painting. And it was only when we started thinking about what Josef Albers had said about colour being a relative, one of the most relative of all things. And so this is a strip of paper that has different coloured paper around behind it. And these two squares are exactly the same colour, but they look entirely different. And it's the same idea that Rothko was playing with. This center color is exactly the same in every instance, but it looks very different depending on what color it's next to. So we had to get our heads around that as well. Now, here's an installation shot. We recreated the niche so that the painting fitted in there very tightly, just as it did in the Holyoke Centre. I want to mention the colour of the walls because it's in the writings, we know that Rothko worked with Wilder Green on a fabric wall covering. We tried for years to get a swatch of this wall covering, and we couldn't do it. But we talked to two people who had helped Mark Rothko stretch and install the paintings, Gene Woodward and Jerry Cohn. And independently, they both pointed us in this direction. So this is actually pretty close to what the original wall colouring was like. And if we turn on the projectors, this is what it looks like. And if you turn around, this is number 4 and number 5. We wanted this door in the centre in the original plans, but the Cambridge Fire Marshal said that couldn't be, and you can't argue with them. And if you turn on the projectors, this is what the murals look like. So about halfway through the exhibition, we had a study day so that people could come and talk, and Harvard is really a great place to bring people together and talk openly about what they think and feel. Terry Winters said that once the projectors were off, Rothko entered the room, which is a very powerful statement. He said he liked the paintings both ways, but couldn't imagine the different feelings that they brought up. The drama of turning off the projectors is like a move from comedy to tragedy unexpectedly. Christiana Powell from the Whitney Museum is a curator of new media, and she had always thought that it was only new media that could have an historic and a restored version simultaneously, and this experience gave her pause to reconsider that notion. Jeffrey Weiss had some serious philosophical issues. He said the substitution of projected light blocks the metaphorical light of the painting and violates the terms of the work. This is a fundamental obstacle. The whole cloth deceptive illusion is unnerving, so he didn't like that the projection was covering the entire visible surface of the painting. The restoration produces a simulacrum, and we're in danger of substituting it for the original, and the original loses its authenticity. And he also said this kind of restoration was inevitable. We are at a crossroads. He also did say that we had handled it impeccably, so it wasn't all bad, but he really had some issues with it. Brad Epley was distracted by a pillow of light in front of the canvas, and I think that's just the kind of response that you expect from someone with very, very highly tuned eyes, from a conservator who looks at colour-filled paintings all the time. He said the restored version is a digital remaster and the unrestored is like a vinyl LP, and wondered which is the more authentic version and at what point do we accept change. And I think this touches on something that we heard this morning. With a 50-year-old painting, we still want there to be a flush of youth about it, just as we do with ourselves. With a 100-year-old painting, we're much more accepting. If we look at a 100-year-old person, we're much more accepting of wrinkles and imperfections in the surface. So I think this is, there's something about us as people that impose our own values onto the paintings that we look at. There were criticisms of the room being theatrical or too staged, and Kate Rothko-Pritzel said that the setting was not a problem. You experienced the room, the space felt right, it feels like Rothko's luminosity. And she also pointed out that the restoration is now tacked onto the history of the murals, so that whenever people talk about the murals, they will think about this exhibition as well. And Christopher Rothko was really struck right away, not so much by the colour, but the way that the paintings still felt like paintings. You still have the feeling of the canvas. For me, that's what makes it feel so believable, because my father's brushstrokes are still there. So that, for him, he really got up close. He was looking at it very, very closely, and he was very pleased with being able to see the brushstrokes. Harry Cooper, I know from experience, is an art historian who looks very, very carefully at paintings, and he said he was totally accepting of the projection. And I think what Martha said is super important, actually. There's been so much attention drawn to the restoration that we're actually in danger of not looking at the paintings. And the whole point of the project was so that we could look at the paintings. It was mentioned earlier, Carol mentioned it, that there was an Art Forum article. It's about 14 pages in the summer issue, which is a very big article, and too many points to go into, but it's well worth reading. For me, the take-home moment was reading Yves Alain Bois's comments. He's somebody who's he's not shy to share his thoughts on any subject, and he really liked what we did. So I after reading it, I went and bought a few more copies, just as backup. In the New Yorker, Luke Menand wrote an article, and he said every afternoon at 4 o'clock, people gather on the 3rd floor of the Harvard Art Museums to watch them turn off the Rothkos. So what we do is we turn the projectors off at 4 o'clock, and people can experience the murals in their unrestored state for an hour before the museum closes. You are seeing, or you feel you are seeing, something that was once believed to have vanished forever. You also, this is why people come to watch the projectors get turned off, see the Rothkos both as they were, almost simultaneously as they are. You experience a transformation that took many years and a few seconds. Mainly, I think, the restoration story gets people hooked because it raises ancient and endlessly fascinating philosophy of art questions. In this respect, the restored murals are really a new work, a work of conceptual art. To look at them is to have thoughts about the nature of art. We look at restored art in museums all the time, and we rarely worry that it's insufficiently authentic. In the case of the Harvard Rothkos, though, the fact that the faded painting and the faked painting, which is what he calls the restored version, are in front of us at the same time somehow makes for a discordant aesthetic experience. And what I'm going to do is just show you what he's talking about.
Okay, here's number 1. Number 2. What happened? Number 3. Number 4. Last one here, number 5. Thank you very much.
Are you taking them?
So that, for me, it's amazing to see that many people in a gallery, and it's also wonderful to see the interest that people have in this. And whether you like what we did or whether you don't, what I feel and we feel as a team is that we did bring Mark Rothko's murals back to a place where you can appreciate them as an image, and they were there open for the public. So we feel that we achieved what it is that we set out to do. And I'd just like to thank all the people who helped us with this project, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. There has to be questions about this.
You're talking about the set of murals as a kind of unitary image. And in what sense does the life conservation make them more unitary image?
So the background...
Hold on a second, I have to listen through the electronic system here. So technology again. Yes.
Okay, so the background colour, which unifies the murals as a cycle, has faded differentially across the surface of the painting, so they've lost the uniformity that was there. Number 2 has a different painting, it's got a different stratigraphy. It was reworked and then a very thin layer of red. was applied over the reworking, and so it looks much bluer now because the red's faded. And so instead of having the triptych working as a single unit, you now have 3 discrete paintings when there's no compensation system on them.
Right. You could just as easily argue that what unites them are the architectonic iconography that runs right through. It's not just the bid towards a unifying monochrome that makes them an image.
No, well, absolutely.
I'm afraid I have to switch totally back to it. Yeah.
So absolutely, there's
Yeah.
the composition of the paintings is so strong, and they do work together. They're very, very powerful paintings. There's no question.
Yeah.
Without one of the elements, I feel we're missing out on something of the experience. With both of them there, with the colour and the composition, it really makes for a very, very powerful experience.
Yeah.
I visited them several times recently, and one of the forays was to determine the light temperature that you guys had selected for the galleries, because you chose LEDs for the overall gallery lighting. Were the projectors also LEDs, and was there any aesthetic questions about choosing the color temperature of the lighting in the projectors? Because I found it a little bit cold.
The compensation system can be used with any lighting source. It could be used for daylight, it could be used for tungsten bulbs, it could be used for anything. The actual source of lighting is irrelevant. It just needs to be set up and the software run for the lighting that's in the space. The LEDs are what are used in the museum, so that's what we had, and so we had to work with that. There wasn't a choice in that regard. And the projectors, the light that comes out of the projectors is not dependent, like it's the light that comes out, and it can be adjusted to compensate for whatever the colour is around it.
Not being a conservator and not having seen this in person, I have 2 questions. The first one is the light from the actual projections, did that possibly cause any further damage because it was so bright? And then secondly, he seemed from one of your earlier discussions, he built up layers and layers of color so the under layers could be seen through the upper layers. And I'd like to know how you think that this projection would compensate for that, even with all your chemical configurations. And like in the old masters paintings that have made, or even the ones that made in 1700 that have made gray underpaintings that would shine through in the upper flush layers, and it gives the painting a different look. So, could you answer those?
Sure. So the light levels were actually about the same as what the tape uses for their paintings. It was about 35, 40 lux. It's very low light levels. It's lower than what we use for watercolors, and we determined by doing some testing that there would be no visible difference between the paintings during the course of the exhibition, so that it was a low enough level not to cause any damage. The second question is relevant to the tape paintings, but it's not relevant to ours. Ours are really just 2 layers of paint. There's the background and the figure. And so those kinds of discussions, it wasn't, we did a lot of, there's a ton of work. I could talk for an hour and a half about this, but we did lots of cross sections. It's really the background colour and the figure, and that's it. Except for number 2, which has got some reworking in it. But we didn't have those issues of like bringing out all these underlayers and so on. So we dodged that bullet.
If you'll forgive someone who just has experience and very little knowledge of Rothkos, okay? So the Rothkos are the Iola resinette, and I know there's some very, distinct colors in it. Then I have experience with the Rothkos that were shown at the Geffen at the Design Center, and they had brighter colors. And then, I'm not talking about the Rothkos as they exist now that have been restored in the new MoCA, exhibit downtown. But when I was at the Rothko Chapel, the first time I walked in, it was very much more somber and darker than I expected it to be. And then I spoke to someone who had an architectural background at the Manil, and they told me that the light in Houston is so unique, the way it comes in. Did that make those, I don't know, maybe Brad can answer, did that make those Rothkos darker and more somber? Did they start out more colorful, or is it just that you used a different color palette in different works?
I mean, I think Brad is, and also Pia, who worked on them as well, could probably talk very clearly about it. But if you look at the ones that, I mean, Rothko would always paint extra pictures and then not install them. There are some spares that are in the Manil collection. And if you look at those, they look very, very different to the ones in the chapel. So something has happened to the ones in the chapel, and I would just urge you to go and look at those and experience it for yourself. But I don't know if any, do you want to say anything about it, Brad?
I think the way they look currently probably has much more to do with the kind of baffle structure that's...
The line from the top,
yeah,
right.
And
I can't remember her name, who's the one who was you worked on, and who had the architectural background. But she knew a great deal about architecture and said something was about the light in Houston.
yeah, it's again, it's another hour and a half talk, but there's been many iterations of the way the light is fed in from the skylight of the chapel, and each iteration it's different.
So they did change in color too. So this would then, if this process were put into the chapel, then those pictures, they would be more analogous to the ones that are on display in the museum itself.
It's possible. I think we'd have to look in and see exactly what degree of color changes happen, but yeah, I think it's similar to lighting systems that could compensate.
Okay, thank you.
This is actually a little bit of a broader question. It made me think of all, as we were going through everything during the day today, from the volume of stuff with the Clyfford Stills work to the Rothkos at the Tate that were damaged, and just how it seems like at some point some of them may just go away regardless of how much work goes into all of this. And then on top of that, the graffiti work at the Tate. How much of this stuff that you guys are studying is informing new things coming into the museum and everything from, stuff that may be street art to other things that are coming in? Because obviously before it gets damaged, before it reaches some sort of state where we're actually going to start losing things, are you guys using this knowledge now then to preserve it from the minute it comes in, so we're not waiting for an accident to happen or for things to start peeling off?
That's a discussion for the panel, I feel, actually. But conservation's a very sharing community, so we share our work with each other all the time. And if somebody has something that they don't know how to deal with, they can reach out to their colleagues and seek advice. And so we're always talking to each other to get advice about how to look after things. And preventative conservation is a very, very important part of the work that we do.
Is it being studied, though, the minute it comes in, let's say, the minute it comes into a collection, so that you guys realize all the various aspects of the pieces, so that you at least now, it seems like you guys are piecing together slides and letters, and thankfully there are a few archived items in collections, but maybe now that things are coming in, and maybe some of these artists are still alive at this point, is it informing the current collections? Yeah, there are lots of interviews with artists, and we try and collaborate with artist studios. We just bought a Flor de Piel by Doris Salcedo for the museum, and we're working with her studio. They gave us a little piece that big that we can fool around with, so we can work out how it's going to age and anticipate what's going to happen, and then determine a strategy to look after it. So I think every major museum is doing something like that, some version of it. But I think the panel will really be able to address that in a very detailed way.
Any other questions? All right. I'll move on. Thank you very much.